welcome to So Easy and the tutorial for the minimalist wallet pattern. Just a quick look at our wallet. As you can see, it really is minimalist. There's nothing fancy to it. It's just functional and plain. So if you know somebody who likes this kind of style, it's great. Opens and closes with a snap, and on the inside there's room for 8 or more bank cards or IDs, whatever you want in these sections just here. And then up at the top it has a full open section where you can include your banknotes, receipts, a shopping list or anything else. So this is the wallet that we're going to sew today, and it's really not difficult at all. But if you've not sewn with Kraft Tex before, then I'll give you a few tips along the way to help you get a great result with this project. We don't need much in the way of materials for our wallet, but we aren't using fabric today, we're using something a little different, so we're going to use a few different tools. So obviously you'll need your pieces of Kraft Tex and your pattern, so print and cut that out in advance. We'll also need some clips or paper clips to use in place of pins, because if we use pins we're going to make some permanent holes, so clips or paper clips will be better. We'll also need some kind of marking tool. I'm using one of these friction heat erasable pens because that's just going to boil out or heat out with the placement of my iron. We also need some different cutting tools, so ignore the rather shabby appearance of this one, but you'll need one of these nice and sharp craft knives to cut the intricate shapes. Or you can do, if you've got some really good small scissors, then you can use small scissors instead. But I think a craft knife would work better in some areas. You'll also need some kind of scoring or folding tool and a variety of rulers to make sure that you can cut and measure your Kraft Tex accurately. The first thing to do will be to prepare your Kraft Tex pieces. So use your pattern and cut that out, and you can either use it as you would a paper pattern for fabric, so you just add it on top of your Kraft Tex and draw or cut around it, or you can take one of your measuring tools, take accurate measurements. They should be pretty straightforward in terms of the measurements. For example, it's 5.5 by 7.25 inches, and then you just transfer those over to your pieces of Kraft Tex and cut with some sharp scissors, a rotary cutter or a craft knife. So I've cut out most of mine. If you can cut out the little shapes on your pattern and also cut the corresponding shape out of your Kraft Tex. Then when it comes to this main piece, again a combination of using your pattern piece and using measuring tools, and I've cut out my pattern, and the first things to do is to mark our folds. So I've marked folds here, here and here, which line up with the pattern, and just scored them and folded the Kraft Tex carefully in both directions along those folds. So I've now got 3 folds in my main piece just here, and also the fold on this piece here also. And once we've done that, then we can work on these others. As you can see just here, I've already cut out these little spaces, and what that helps is when I then lay the pattern accurately over on top of my Kraft Tex, I've used my friction pen and I've been able to just mark where these come, and I've also marked and carefully measured the lines that are on the pattern piece and transferred those to the Kraft Tex too. So this side is one that I've already cut, so I've made my straight cuts, as you can see here, and also these cuts, and I've done those with the craft knife, and now I just have to do the same on this side. So my straight cuts are already done. So just take the craft knife, and I don't actually need to use too much pressure, providing you're using a nice sharp knife. I can easily cut through. I'm just going to move the Kraft Tex around and leave the knife in place as I go to make sure I get a nice smooth curve. And it comes up to the top. That just pops out, and I get a nice smoothly cut shape. So once all of my pieces are cut and prepared, then I need to pre-treat them. So if you want to, you can just make the Kraft Tex wallet as it is, just with the Kraft Tex in its natural state, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do like to give mine that crinkled, leathery kind of texture, and also by soaking and boiling, we're going to make the Kraft Tex a little more soft and easier to work with too, rather than the cardboardy feel that we have now. So once you've got all of your pattern pieces prepared, then if you take a look at the earlier tutorial I did about the various different ways to prepare your Kraft Tex, and either throw it in the washing machine or soak it in some hot water or boil it for 10 minutes or so, and then give it a good crinkle, make sure everything's all scrunched up, so I don't have to worry about that. It all starts off nice and smooth, but actually I want that crinkled look on mine, so I'm going to open it out and just make sure that everything is nice and uniformly crinkled before I boil or soak mine, so that I'll get that nice look to the Kraft Tex once it's prepared. So cut your pieces, prepare your Kraft Tex by cooking, boiling, washing, whatever you want to do with it, if that's what you want, and then we'll come back and start actually assembling our wallet. So my Kraft Tex pieces have now all been soaked, and I've dried them with my iron, but I've just left them a little bit damp, because I find when it's a little bit damp it's still very flexible and pliable and can be a little bit easier to work with. So don't be afraid to work with it just a little bit damp and it will be easier. So I'm going to put those two pieces away for now, because we need to just work on this one. And our first thing to consider is the placement of our snap for the closure of the wallet on the outside. So we've got the mark here on the pattern. I'm just going to transfer that over. Now it's time to decide which you want to have as your inside or outside. The Kraft Tex has more of a texture on one side and a smoother finish on the other, so it's up to you which you decide, but decide now which is going to be your outside, because your snap needs to go on the outside. So I'm going to have this piece here as my outside, and I'm just going to transfer over. So what I'm going to do is just make an X through the center of this box. So now I've got the center matched up, everything's matched there, so I'm just going to make a mark through the center of the pattern, and that's going to show me on the Kraft Tex the center just there. So now I can mark my snap position just here, and in fact I'm just going to press my snap right through. I can use my tool to make a larger hole. And I've got one of these little reinforcing squares. Where is it? Just here. So again, I'm going to make a hole through the center of my reinforcing square with my tool. And my reinforcing square is going to go on the inside. Okay, so if I put my snap this way, the snap goes with the pointy part. If you're using these cam snaps like me, these are nice and easy to use, is going to go through the reinforcing part like that. Then that goes through the hole that we've punched on our wallet. And the closing part of the snap here is going to go on the outside. So now I just need to get this under my plier, and this is another reason for having your Kraft Tex just that little bit damp. At the moment it's still nice and flexible, so I can easily just fold that a little bit and get it under the plier like that. Make sure everything's good on the other side and set that snap in place. So once the snap was in place on the little reinforcing square that we've just got on the back here, I just went with my scissors and just cut round the excess so that it's not too bulky on this inside part. Okay, so that's the first part done. Now we need to work on our little closing flap. So you can either leave it as it is without anything on at all, or if you like, you can do a line of stitching around the outside. So that's what I'm going to do with mine. I'm going to start down here in one corner and just very close to the edge, nice and evenly all the way, to do a row of stitching all the way around. So now perhaps it's time to talk a little bit about stitching with Kraft Tex. If this is your first time, then you may find that you need to experiment a little bit with your machine and see what works best. So get some scraps of Kraft Tex, try out different needle sizes, different stitch lengths. I find that when I'm working through a number of layers, I need to use a heavier weight needle. So I'm going to use a size 90 needle for mine. It's thicker, so it does leave more of a hole in your Kraft Tex. But when you're doing multiple layers like we will be later on, the heavier weight needle is better. Normally I also sew with a 2.5 stitch length, but when I go to Kraft Tex I like to do less perforations with the needle, so I'm going to move up to a 3.5 stitch length. So I'll stitch around the edge and then we'll come back and actually attach it to the wallet itself. Next we need to sew the closing flap part here onto the outer of the bag itself. So make sure you're working on the outside of the bag, that's where you've got your snap facing up, and transfer, should be the other way around, the placement for your strap just here over to the outside of the wallet, and we're going to sew that in place. So I've just made some little marks here as a reference for these bottom corners, and you need to sew the flap on here with just an inch box. So if you start in one corner, sew across, up an inch, down and back, and just sew that in place with a 1 inch box just there. You don't need any pins or anything. Once you've sunk your needle down in, as long as you're making sure that these corners are all matching up, then that should be fine. So now we want to start assembling our wallet. In the center here we have this fold, so just fold that up and give it a good crease, and the same on our inner piece. And give that a good crease too, and then we need to match those two center folds. Now if you match the two folds, and you can see them here where the little cutout pieces are, you'll see that the lining piece doesn't quite come to the folds on this other side, and that's intentional. So what we want to do now is, while we've still got this in the fold, we're going to fold these pieces up, give them a nice crease, and then fold the wallet completely in half, making sure that these edges here match up, and then we've got a nice crease in the fold. And what we want to aim to do is, if you look down inside the fold just here, is that the fold on the inner fabric, or the inner Kraft Tex there, I'll just knot mine back up in place, those two folds are going to meet nice and tight together just in those corners, and then square everything up, make sure it looks good and that there aren't any gaps, and that looks good. And now we need to just clip a few things in place. So up at the top section that I've got here, I'm just going to pull this back out the way, and I open that up. I'm going to put a couple of clips just there. Now if I fold back up again, make sure everything's nice and square, and I want to do the same on this side. I'm going to add a couple of clips. Okay, so if you've done it as I've got it here, oh, I've clipped through too many layers. We're only going to clip through the top layer here with the holes, and the inner layer of the Kraft Tex will not clip into the outer layer. So when you fold it like that, you've got a nice crisp fold just here. These edges, don't worry if they're a little bit off just now, because we can always trim that a little bit. It's easier than it is with fabric. And when we open it, then if you can see how a gap creates when you fold it, it folds together neatly here without any gaps, and then when you open it, a little gap is created just there, and that's exactly what we're looking for, and that means that we've done that correctly. So what we end up with is something that looks like this, and keeping these two edges pinned together, you need to now take these over to the sewing machine and sew from the top here down to this point, and from this point here down to this point, and then also on this center section. So you do the edges first to make sure everything stays in place nice and square, and then if you use your pattern or just a ruler to lightly mark yourself a line through the center here, and then you're going to sew from the top here again down towards this fold. So you'll need to do this over the free arm of the sewing machine. If you imagine your machine is here, you're going to slide it over the free arm in order to do those lines. So I've now got this top edge sewn just here for these two and these two central lines. So time to just fold up the wallet again, make sure everything is good. Our top edge, we'd lined that up nice and neatly, so everything is still good on that top edge. On my bottom edge, you'll notice, if you look very closely, that I've got a little bit of the Kraft Tex poking out here from the lining, so I've either stretched it a little bit during my pressing and sewing process, or I didn't cut it quite accurately to start with. But the beauty with Kraft Tex is obviously we can just trim these pieces off. However, what I propose to do is to sew them first, because again things might shift just that little bit during sewing, so I'm going to sew first and then trim. So I'm just going to fold the wallet up nice and tightly like this, and just make sure everything is nice and lined up and square, and take a few more of my pins, my clips rather, just clip those edges. And I'm going to clip it while it's closed, just to make sure that we get that nice neat fold just here that's going to give us that little bit of volume in the bottom here when we open the wallet out later on. So now that I've got it clipped, in the same way that we've sewed along this edge, we're also now going to sew along this edge, but this time we're going to sew through all layers. So you've got 1, 2, 3 layers of Kraft Tex to sew through this time. So I'm going to sew either from the top to here, or from the here to here. Leave this part here unsewn, and then sew again on this side, and try and make your stitching even like you did on this other side so that it looks nice and neat. So I'll do mine, and then we'll have a look at just trimming off these little bits of extra. So I've sewn this final edge through all the layers here, and I do still have a little bit poking out, so I'm just going to take my craft knife, and if I line up the edge of the ruler here with the inner edge of the fabric that I've used when I was sewing, then I should be able to just run along here, a nice sharp knife in one go, and neatly just take off that extra, a little bit more just there. Oh, no, I think I've made it worse. Okay, so I need to go back over with my ruler, just go through that little bottom layer. There we go. A little bit at a time is better. You can always take away a little bit, but you can add a little bit more if you make a mess. Okay, so I've got a little bit, just a little bit more there. A little bit more at this point. Probably cut now that from the other side. I just need to trim up that little layer there. Okay. So now, top and bottom, everything is looking nice and square and true. I'm happy with that. So our last thing to do is just work on adding the other part of the snap just here. It's time to add the other part of our snap now onto the closing part of the wallet just here. So I've taken the other little reinforcing square, made a hole through the center, and taken the cap just here from the snap, pushed it through, and I've just pushed that down closely here, and that makes an impression in the Kraft Tex. Now if I just get a pair of sharp scissors, I can cut out around here and just make a little washer, and it's just going to give a little bit of reinforcement around that closing snap. So I'll cut this out now, and then we'll add it to the snap on to the flap of the wallet. Time now to add the other part of the snap. So I've just closed the wallet up loosely and folded the flap part over. You want to think that obviously your wallet isn't always going to be empty, it's going to have things in, so don't pull this really tight down here, otherwise you'll be too tight, you won't be able to get anything in. So leave a nice little bit of space, and then if you press the end of the strap just here down over the existing snap, you can make a little impression in the end here of where you want your snap to go. And then if you use some kind of pokey tool, try and get a hole in the center, and that's where our snap will go. So now I've got the little washer. I'm going to put the washer on the pointy part just there. It's going to give just that little bit of extra reinforcement. Put the point through the hole in the strap, and now I can fix the other part of the snap to the inside just here. Check everything looks good. Don't want to mess up at this point. Press that into place. Looking good. Now I can snap my little wallet closed. So that's it. Easy as that. Your wallet is now completed and you've got plenty of space now to go ahead and put everything you need to in there, and it's nice and slim and neat, nothing fussy about it, something easily that a man would like as well as a lady. So thank you very much for following along with this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed trying out some Kraft Tex for the first time. Let me know what your feedback is. I'm really interested to know whether you'd like some more ideas for bags, wallets or other accessories using Kraft Tex. Hope to see you at So Easy again soon. Thank you.